Welcome back, aliens. My name is Navin Reddy, and let's continue with the series on Neo blockchain. Now, till this point, we have talked about Neo basics. We have written some code as well to get our first smart contract, but that was simple, right? And then we have this question: how can we use this in real world? Now, first of all, we are trying to find all the solutions, or in fact, we are trying to find problems which are already solved in Web 2.0, and then we have to move them to Web 3.0 because that's the future, right? So, how do you build an application on 3.0? Now, the use case we are going to use here is domain registration, which is quite famous use case, right? So let's say we'll build an application where you can register a domain, and it will be done with the help of a blockchain. Specifically, we're talking about Neo blockchain here. And then we will be able to look up, which is search for a particular domain. Maybe you want to know who owns this particular domain. Maybe you want to transfer your domain to someone else. Maybe you want to sell it. Example, the moment you have a famous domain name, someone can buy it, right? So you can sell it for some currency, or maybe you can delete it. So this is what we're going to do here. Just to keep it simple, we are not going to do any checks. Example, let's say you want to delete a domain. Now we'll not be checking who is the owner, only owner can delete it, but that's the ideal solution, right? But just to keep it simple, we'll not do that. We'll just say delete, okay? But what if you want to check? That's your assignment, okay? We'll see that, what I'm talking about. So let's get started with the code. Now, what are the things we have? We already got a private blockchain, but as you can see, the blockchain is not running. If your blockchain is running, it will show the wallets as well. And we already have our wallets, but then I have done the reset for the blockchain, and we lost all the data, all the blocks, and all the wallets. So what I will do is I will just start the blockchain. I guess it will have my wallet, but without any currency. So if I click on any wallet, which is Naveen, you can see we don't have any Neos, we don't have any gas coins. So we'll do that first. We'll get some Neos and we'll get some gas. In fact, we only need gas coins, right? So let's use that. Okay, so I will transfer some assets. I want to transfer gas, let's say 1,000 gas coins from Genesis to Naveen. And the same thing can be done for Kiran as well. I want to transfer some gas coin, again 1,000 gas coins from Genesis to Kiran, and that's done. We got our 2 wallet with some gas coin, and if you can refresh, you can see we got 1,000 gas coins, and that's enough. Now, once we have that, let's create a smart contract, because the moment you want to write a code, you will use a smart contract. So what I will do here is, as you can see, I don't have any contract as of now, but if I click on N3, and if I click on these 3 dots, I can create a contract. Now, which language? Of course, C# we are going for. The website, the project name, the contract name, we can have it domain for domain registration. And that's our contract. In fact, I already have written some code for this. I will just replace that here, just to keep it simple. And now this is a simple domain contract and nothing to do with the domain name. So as you can see, it's change number, and we'll keep this action number change. We should be saying on change, right? We can do that. But we'll not be using this. We can simply removing this part. We don't need this. And we don't need this methods. We want to change this, right, for the domain registration. Okay, simple code. This is what we are keeping. Others, we are removing it. So we got domain contract, Navin Reddy, and domain registration. Anything else we want to change? Nothing. And let's add our methods. Now, what exact methods I'm looking for? First one, I should be able to register the domain. I should be able to look up the domain. I should be able to transfer domain. I should be able to delete the domain. So let's start with the method which is register, because that's what we do, right? So let's do for the registration. And for that, let's write a method. So the method name can be public static void, because we are doing registration. We are not expecting anything in return. So we'll say public static void, and we'll say method name is register. Okay, now in registration, what are the things you have to pass? Of course, a user will enter a domain name, will ask for that. So here in the registered brackets, I can say a user will enter the domain, and we just have to take the domain and save it in the blockchain or in the store basically. So we can say, how do we store? It's very simple. We have already done that. So we can use a class called storage.put, and in bracket, you can mention the domain name. So I want to put the domain, right? But if you remember, we have to pass 3 parameters here. The first one is the context, the current context. We have not mentioned that. And second is the key. So domain will be the key. And we have to mention one more thing, which is the value, right? Value will be the user. So if I'm registering a domain, which user is owning this domain? So that's what we want. So first thing we have to mention is the context, right? So context is storage dot current context. That's done. The next thing we have to mention is domain, and we have to mention the value as well, which is the user. So example, Naveen owns that domain. How do I know? So whoever is registering, he becomes the owner, or he or she becomes the owner, right? How do I know who is calling this function or who is calling this method? So in that case, we can use the transaction object. So I can say var tx equal to, because that's a transaction. Okay, so we're getting a variable transaction, and how will I get the current transaction? So you have to use this inbuilt runtime dot script container. So you can say script container, it will give you the object of transaction. So you just have to pass the transaction here. So the moment you say script container, it will give you the object of transaction. You just have to typecast it with the proper object or proper type, and then you will get the transaction object. And using that tx, you can get the sender of this. So you can say sender. Cool, right? By doing this, you are able to store the owner of that domain in that storage. That's it. But then we also want to look up, right? So we have to write a method for lookup as well. Now, how will you do that? It's quite simple. So you can say public static. Okay, lookup will return something, right? So in this case, I want to return the value which is of type uint 160, because that's how the value will be stored. And the method name we can have as lookup. And now, how do we look up? So let's say when I say lookup, what I want to know is if I pass a domain name, I want to know who is the owner of it. So I can say string domain. Okay, but how will you find this now? So in this case, what you will do is you need to see the data is getting stored here, right, in the storage. You just have to use this storage. So I can say return, I want to return the value, but what value I want to return is I want to fetch data from the storage. So I will say storage dot. Which method you can use to get the value is get. Right? Okay, I forgot to put here, which is capital P, not small p. And then using this get, you can pass from where you want to fetch this. I want to fetch this from the current context. And we have talked about it, right? Different smart contract will have a different context. So I want to fetch from the current context. And what I want to fetch is, I have to specify the key. Key in this case is domain. In fact, you can do in reverse as well. Maybe you, while registering, you can mention the sender as the key and a domain as a value. Now, the only problem is one sender can have multiple domains, and that's what we are doing in this way, because one domain. So we have from sender to domain, we have one-to-many relationship because one sender can have multiple domains, but one domain can belong to only one sender. And that's why we are going in this way, where domain is a key and a sender is a value. Okay, cool. So that's how you look up, right? So you search and you return the value. It's that simple. I guess the only problem you might be facing is when you return, it might not give the same type. I want this type of data. So you can just typecast it just to be on safer side. So that's how we do it. We got register, we got lookup. Now what else we need here? Maybe the next thing you need is transfer. How do you transfer the domain? So in this case, I will say public static void. I want to transfer, right? I don't want to any return type. So I can say transfer. And in this, what you have to mention, first of all, you have to mention the domain itself, what domain you want to transfer. So I can say string domain. The next thing you want to mention is to whom you want to transfer this. So I can say uint 160, that's my to. And then from, you don't have to mention from, right? Because if you mention the domain, we will know who that owner is. So from is not required. And then we can say, okay, first of all, we need to get that from as well. Not from the parenthesis, but from the domain name. So I can say owner is equal to, okay, which method? Maybe I can use lookup to call that. Anyway, we have that method created, right? So in the lookup, I can pass the domain, which will give me the owner as well. Simple stuff, right? And using this, I can just save the data. Now, the only thing is when you say you are storing data, you're actually updating it. So the earlier owner, let's say if I'm transferring that domain from Kiran to Naveen, the earlier owner was Kiran, and now the new owner will be Naveen. So when you say update, it's very simple. You have to use the same thing. Storage.put will do both the things. That's why it is put, not push. I hope you know the difference between put and push. If not, just go to YouTube and search for put versus push in HTTP. So we'll say storage.current context, comma. Okay, then I have to mention the key, which is the domain, and the value to whom I'm transferring to, that to. In fact, actually, we don't need this owner because anyway, we are replacing it. Now, why this will be useful? Now, I have a question for everyone. Just put that in the comment section. When I say transfer, it will transfer the domain from the owner to the address we mentioned here. But the real question is, who can do this? Anyone can transfer, or only owner can transfer? If you write this type of method, you are in deep trouble because anyone can call this function. and anyone can call it, anyone can transfer. We want to check first who is the owner. If the sender of this transaction and the owner of this domain is same, then only you have to do this. Okay, that will be assignment, and if I will try to make a separate video on this. How do we do it? Okay, that's done. We are done with the transfer as well. The next thing you can do here is, I can say public. Okay, what other thing we need? We need delete, right? So we'll say public void delete, static void delete. And in this, I can do the same thing. Again, the same thing, right? Only the owner can delete, it should be able to delete that. But I just want to keep it simple. So I will say storage dot delete, because that's the method we have. So we have method like get, put, and delete for deleting the data. From where you want to delete this, again, this thing will remain common, which is the current context. And then you have to mention the key which you want to delete, which is domain in this case. And that's it. I think we are done with the code here. We got all the things which we needed. We got a smart contract, we got register, we got lookup, we got transfer, we got delete. I hope this will work. How do I check this if this is working? So it's quite simple. Just go to terminal and say run build task. Which task you want to run? I want to run the domain here. It's taking some time to deploy. Oh, first of all, we are building it, right? Building done. Oh, there is an error. Oh, the problem is, as I mentioned before, every project will have a test folder. So the first thing you do is you delete this test folder. Don't do that in production environment. Since we are into learning phase, we are not using test cases. But test cases are very, very important. So again, terminal, run build task. I want to run this domain. I hope there will not be any error now. Okay, there is no error as you can see. Now, once you find there is no error, you can deploy this. You can just go to N3, right-click on your project or right-click on your blockchain and say deploy the contract. Now, who will be deploying this contract? I can say Naveen or Kiran. That's our choice. Let's go with Naveen. And the domain contract. This is the contract we want to deploy to the blockchain. Okay, it will take some time for deployment. Great, deployment done. And now it's time to invoke the contract. So remember this step, write a code, build the task, deploy the contract, invoke the contract. Now, when you say invoke, you will find your contract here. You can see that we got domain contract. We have register, lookup, transfer, delete. I want to register a domain name. So I want to register a domain name. Domain name is telusko.com and run. But then we have not mentioned the owner, right? So whoever is the account, so you can select the account. I can say Naveen. And of course, call by entry because I don't want the subsequent smart contract to get the signature. Okay, it will take some time. I hope it will work. Oh, great, it is working. You can see there is no exception. So it is working. So we are able to call register, and this is a domain name which we have registered. Who is the owner? It's Naveen, because by Naveen we are calling this. Things are looking good. Everything looks good. Let me just close this. How do I verify? Let's do the lookup. Now, since we have two owners, who owns this particular domain? Let's run this. And anyone can check. Kiran can check, Naveen can check. Let me try with Kiran. And let's say Kiran is searching who is the owner of this domain. And done. Let's open this. And you can see who is calling this. Kiran is calling this. And response. Result says who is the owner? It's Naveen. Can you see that? Now let's say Kiran says, hey, I want to own this domain. So let's say Kiran gives a call to Naveen by saying, hey, I want to own your domain. Let's say Naveen says, hey, I will charge you around $1 million to own my domain. And we did that transaction. And now I want to transfer this domain, which is telusko.com, to, I have to mention the address. So address is Kiran. So you can say @Kiran. It will pick up the wallet. You don't have to actually mention the exact address. Just say @Kiran and that's done. And now run this step. Now, this is what you have to check. Okay, so if you have multiple wallets, anyone can do to transfer because we are not checking. You should check. And let's try to do that in the next video. But here we are just focusing on Naveen is trying to transfer. So it should be done now. It will take some time. So you can see it says confirm. If I click on that, sender, who is invoking this contract is Naveen, and transfer done to Kiran. You can see that. Let's verify. How do I verify? Of course, we can do the lookup, right? So I can say lookup. We don't want the second parameter. So we're looking for this domain now. Let's see who owns this domain. And anyone can do a lookup. Let's say Naveen is doing a lookup here and done. If I open this, you can see Naveen is invoking it. And let's see who is the owner. The owner is Kiran. This is what we wanted, right? And we got it. So close this. So checked for register, lookup, transfer. You can look for delete. So that's your assignment. Write this code and try delete and let me know if it is working for you. But as I mentioned before, this is not a production ready code, not exactly anything close to it. because anyone can do the transfer, anyone can do the registration, and we can do multiple registration, right? Because we are not checking if the domain is already registered. So to this point, we have seen how do we do the domain registration with the help of blockchain, and then we were able to do the registration, lookup, transfer, and delete. But that is still not complete, right? Because anyone can do the transfer, anyone can delete it. We don't want that. Transfer should be done only by the owner of the domain. Same goes for delete. Delete should be done only by the owner of the domain. Same goes for registration. Registration is anyone can do it, but then it should not be the double registration of the same domain, right? We have to check that as well. And then there are some pre-checks as well. Normally what you do is when you do any validation, we check for the characters. Of course, domain name will not be having any numbers. And so those things. Now, we already have a good code available. So what I will do is I will replace this code with the code available, and then we'll try to explain the steps there. So before that, let me create a new contract. I will say contract, and I will say create contract. This time I will say this is the registration, because this is the code given in the official website of Neo. So we'll use the same code. Let's replace this code by the code which is available on Neo website. Okay, so done the changes. You can see we got this registration contract, and we have some extra things here. Now, first of all, let's verify the things which we already had, right? Oh, before that, we need to do one more thing, right? Now, since we changed the existing registration domain, it's time to delete that folder which is test. I will say delete. And then we have to also delete a line from there. It's done here. Okay, done. Now, let me explain what is there here. First of all, we got let's do the lookup. Okay, they have one more method here. So first of all, we got get owner. It's not required. We can put that in lookup as well, but then let's have an extra method. Now, what we are doing when you say lookup. So first of all, in lookup, we are doing validation. So whatever domain name you're passing will be validated first. Now, what we are doing in validation, basic validation stuff, right, which you do in normal projects for name, for email IDs. So we are checking if the domain name has all the lower characters, right? And that's the only thing we are checking. Maybe dot will also not support it. You can add that validation there. You can just change it as per your need. And of course, the domain name should have at least one character, right? It should not be empty. Now, once you do the validation, you will get the owner. In the get owner, what you're doing is you're fetching the owner. We have done that before. And then if the owner, I mean, when you fetch the owner, it should have some value. If it doesn't have any value, it will be 0. Don't worry, you will get this code in the GitHub links. I will push this in on GitHub, and so that you will find the code so that you can use it. Okay, next I want is registration. In registration as well, we'll validate first, and next we'll check if the domain is already registered. And we have done that before, right? Now, what extra you are doing here? Only we have not done the check before, right? So how do we check? So first of all, we get the owner, and we'll check for the particular domain if it is non-zero. If the domain is already present, if this returns a non-zero value, then domain is already there. That means we'll print already registered. In terms of transfer, this is something different now. In terms of transfer, we are doing multiple checks. This was the important check for me, which is only the owner should be able to do the transfer. So that means the invoker of that method, if it is same as the owner, then it works. Otherwise, if it is not the owner, then you will say not authorized, because check witness will give you the value which is the current signer who has signed this invocation. But then we can do some extra checks as well, right? What if the domain is not there? If the domain is 0, not registered, because how can you transfer something which is not registered? And then what if this receiver is invalid? In that case, we'll say invalid transfer, right? Now we can have one more check for delete. In case of delete as well, we can check that same thing. Domain should be there before deleting, and there should be the sender of the transaction should be same as the owner. Otherwise, it will say not authorized. So that's a check you can do. But again, the concept remains same. The basic things we have done already. So that's your domain registration on Neo blockchain. So yeah, that's it from this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comment section, and do subscribe for further videos. Bye-bye.